Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. I bought a GB operator from Epilogue so I can back up my Game Boy and my Game Boy Advance games. A little backstory here, I recently got into playing my old Pokemon games and I wanted to share my experience. I wanted a good way to film as well as protect my game files, which is why I bought the GB operator. I wanted the ability to play on an actual cart while using my PC, which is something the GB operator can do. There are actually a few different devices that can do this type of thing, one of the other ones being the GBX Cart RW. The GB operator does the same thing as the GBX Cart RW, but with the addition of actually being able to play from the cart and recognize official cartridges. GBX Cart RW, from what I have heard, is much better at writing custom games onto the flash carts, but I don't have any plans to do that, so I went with the GB operator. I also like that the GB operator came with an actual cover and seemed more user-friendly. Now let's get on with the unboxing. It came in this really nicely packed box. You can see me opening it here with my little samurai sword. It's nicely sealed and it looks pretty official. After taking off the wrap, inside the instructions are laying on top. The instructions are pretty straightforward and uncomplicated. It has this little USB plug-in and then of course the device itself, which looks pretty nice. I like that it's transparent so you can see the inner workings. That's pretty much everything that came with it. My first impression of it with zero usage is it looks and feels really high quality. The plastic outside feels thick and sturdy, and I notice my fingerprints don't really leave marks on it. I like the arrow on the device to show you which direction to place the cartridge in. The USB felt and looked pretty standard. The bottom of the device also has a non-slip material that feels almost rubbery but velvety at the same time. In order to properly use the device, I will need to download a software separately, which is kind of meh. It would have been nice to have the device automatically install the software for you instead of having to go to Epilogue website yourself. I plugged the USB into my computer and into the device, then promptly went to the Epilogue website. I found the install page for the playback application and downloaded it for Windows. The installer popped up, I looked through it, the terms and agreements, created a file location, and installed the application. Afterwards, the GB operator application UI popped up on my screen ready to go. Installation was super easy even though it wasn't a part of the device itself. The instructions that the device comes with tells you where you can find the installer too. So again, everything looks pretty good, but the real test is how it actually handles the games. I have heard stories that the GB operator can sometimes erase your save data as well as the GBX Cart RW. So I knew that there was a possibility going into this that my games could be erased. Usually it's a result of a battery in the cart not being the right voltage, or the cart's pins being dirty, or simply not inserting the carts properly into the device. I recently had changed the battery in yellow, so I knew for sure yellow would be fine. Blue and red, I was a little more nervous for because they didn't have the battery placed recently and I didn't know how long ago the battery was replaced. I also didn't have a way to test the batteries beforehand, so I kind of went into this a little blind. Little did I know this would be foreshadowing. Since I know my yellow version had a fresh battery, I decided to test that one first. I plugged my Pokemon Yellow into the GB operator and saw it pop up on my screen. I was also happy to see that it could tell that the cartridge was official. I already knew it was official, as well as my red and blue games, but nice to see the feature in action. I do own a replica copy of Blue as well, so when I placed that one in, GB operator could not read it, so this function does work as intended. Fortunately, I forgot to film that part, so you'll just have to take my word for it. I decided to go through the settings a bit just to see what kind of things it could do. It had more settings than I thought it would. It had specific settings for the playback and its data, the type of emulation it uses, the emulation settings, settings for the LED and controller settings. It even had a built-in section for cheat codes and a third-party source for achievements, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if I will utilize the achievement function though. After checking out the settings, it was time to test the ability to read the games. Lo and behold, it did. I quickly realized, however, that the controller needed to be adjusted since I couldn't figure out how to select the continue option. I was playing with my keyboard, so I paired the keys that I thought would work best. Finally, I was able to actually play the game. I wanted to make sure it was reading the save properly, so I went and looked at my Pokemon, my character's badges, and my Pokédex. Everything was reading fine, so I just stepped outside the Pokemon Center and saved the game to test that the save function worked. Now here is the scary part, actually backing up the game ROM and its save file. I went to the data section of the application and backed up the ROM first. It prompts you to create a file location. I just made a Pokemon folder and backed it up there. It has this interesting data grid that flashes green squares while it backs up the ROM, which is kind of interesting. After that, it was time to back up the save file. It also prompts you to select a file location, so I saved it in the same folder as the ROM. The data grid turns blue this time, which matches the LED colors on the GB operator, which flashes green when backing the ROM and blue when backing the save file. I wanted to test the ROM first, so I opened up my MGBA emulator to see if it had properly ripped the games from yellow, which turned out to be a success and was reading the save file as well. I flipped through some of my Pokemon info just to be sure everything was in order, and after that I decided to test the cart itself to make sure it was functioning properly still. The save file was intact with all my Pokemon, Pokédex, and gym badges there. I was feeling pretty confident at this point and I knew how to do everything now, so I went ahead and did the same for blue and red. I backed up both ROMs, backed up the saves on both of them. I went to test red first to see if everything was properly done since it was already plugged in. That's when I saw it. The new game option with no continue. And my heart just sank. My Pokemon Red game that I had been playing for months, collecting all my Pokemon, and was about to beat the Elite Four on, was gone. It was gone. But I thought there was some hope it could be recovered. I quickly went and checked the files in the folder, hoping I could recover something. I thought maybe the data was saved but was gone off the actual cart, so I started up the MGBA and there it was again, just new game option only. And at this point I was really sweating because it was looking grim for my save file. I moved to the actual file that was supposed to be my save and realized it was not recognized as an Epilogue save file. I thought maybe that's the problem. So I made the Epilogue playback be the save files application, hoping this would fix the problem. And still no continue option. I was devastated. My save was gone. I realized I hadn't checked my blue, so I quickly looked at my blue's save and I held my breath. And saw it had saved properly, which brought me some needed relief. I was really sad my red save file was gone now though. I had worked endlessly for it for literal months. There was a silver lining though. I wanted to do a review of the first Pokemon Gen, and when I first started playing the games, I didn't really think about doing that until I was towards the end of the games. Now with my red file gone, it gives me an opportunity to actually record the playthrough of the game. I did also remember all the Pokemon I had along with their names and the characters, so I decided to replay Red and recreate the save I had for the most part. I did do some digging to figure out why the backup save got corrupted on my Red. I've come to the conclusion that it was probably because the cartridge's pins were really dirty. While the other games had clean pins, I cleaned them up with isopropyl alcohol, and after that I hadn't had any issues since with the GB operator. Since there was no way to tell what the battery was reading at, I'm just going with that. Despite losing my Red save file, I have a mostly positive view of the GB operator. It works pretty good as long as the batteries in the games are high enough voltage and their pins are clean. I'm able to play the games on the computer scaled way up and have it saved directly onto the cart. Back up the ROM and their saves without too much worry. Epilogue's application is easy to use, and the nice thing is you can use it on multiple computers without much fuss. I can take the cartridge out and play it on my Game Boy or SP, and have what I did on the computer be on the save, which is pretty neat. It also functions as a backup console if something were to happen to my SP or Game Boy. I could still play the actual carts, which is a bonus. Things don't last forever, which is why I wanted to do what I could to preserve the games in my memories. The GB operator allows me to do just that, even if it is a little finicky at times. I would recommend this to anyone who wants to preserve their games and play on their actual carts despite the loss I experienced. I still was able to preserve 2 of my original saved games, and now at the time of writing this, preserve my halfway finished Red version. All of my other GBA games from this point have already lost their save files from batteries being drained, so I don't think I will be running into this issue again. Have any of you ever experienced the loss of a precious save file? Let me know so we can trauma bond in the comments below. That's the end of this video, everybody. I'll see you next time.